He was holding the pen, the tip hovering just millimeters above the dotted line. To anyone else in the restaurant, it looked like a boring business meeting. Two young executives helping an elderly man with his retirement papers. But Sarah, a waitress who had been invisible to them all night, saw what no one else did. She saw the vial slip from the woman's sleeve. She saw the powder dissolve into the old man's scotch, and she knew that if that pen touched the paper, an innocent man would lose everything. With her heart hammering against her ribs, she didn't think. She didn't calculate the consequences. She just acted. She marched over, grabbed the old man's arm, and whispered the 6 words that would change both their lives forever. "Sir, you have to leave now." The dinner rush at the Velvet Oak was always a battlefield, but tonight the air felt heavier than usual. It was a Tuesday, usually a slow night in downtown Chicago, but the rain battered against the stained glass windows, driving people inside for warmth and expensive wine. Sarah Jenkins adjusted her apron, wincing as a sharp pain shot up her left calf. She had been on her feet for 9 hours straight. At 24 years old, Sarah felt 40. Her life was a series of calculated subtractions. If she skipped lunch, she could afford bus fare. If she walked home in the rain, she could save $5 to put toward her mother's medical bills. "Jenkins, table 4 needs water. Stop daydreaming." The voice of Rick, the floor manager, cut through the ambient jazz music. Rick was a man who believed kindness was a weakness, and tips were something to be skimmed. "On it, Rick," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with the rent overdue and the threatening letters from the hospital piling up on her kitchen counter. She grabbed a crystal pitcher and headed toward table 4, a semi-private booth tucked away in the back corner, usually reserved for VIPs who didn't want to be seen. Tonight, however, the occupants seemed like an odd mismatch. Sitting against the plush red velvet was an elderly man who looked entirely out of place. He wore a tweed jacket that had seen better days, with patches on the elbows that looked hand-stitched. His hair was white and thinning, and he kept adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses with a trembling hand. He looked like a grandfather waiting for a bus, not a patron of a restaurant where a salad cost $30. Across from him sat 2 sharks. There was no other word for them. The man, who had introduced himself loudly to the hostess as Marcus Thorne, wore a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Sarah made in a year. He had the kind of smile that showed too many teeth and reached nowhere near his eyes. Next to him was Elena Vane. She was striking, sharp, and terrifyingly poised, tapping away on a tablet with manicured nails that looked like talons. As Sarah approached to pour the water, she became invisible. It was a superpower of the service industry. Rich people didn't see waitresses. They saw moving furniture that delivered food. "It's a standard restructuring of the trust, Arthur," Marcus was saying, his voice smooth like oil. "Nothing you need to worry your head about. We're just simplifying the assets so you can retire to that lake house without the tax burden." The old man, Arthur, looked down at the thick stack of legal documents spread across the white tablecloth. "It seems thicker than last time, Marcus. Are you sure I shouldn't have my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, take a look?" Elena laughed. It was a cold, tinkling sound. "Arthur, please. Henderson is 90 years old. He barely understands email, let alone complex modern asset diversification. We're trying to save you millions here. If you wait for Henderson to read this, the fiscal quarter will end, and you'll be hit with the 40% penalty. We discussed this." Sarah poured the water into Arthur's glass. He looked up at her, and for a second, their eyes met. His were a watery blue, filled with confusion and a deep, weary sadness. "Thank you, my dear," Arthur whispered. "You're welcome, sir," Sarah replied softly. "Excuse me," Marcus snapped, not even looking at Sarah. "We are in the middle of a private conversation. Can we get a bottle of the 98 Pinot and bring this man a scotch? Neat, the expensive stuff." "And make it quick," Elena added, finally looking up from her tablet with a glare of annoyance. "We have a flight to catch." Sarah nodded and backed away. As she walked toward the bar, a knot formed in her stomach. She knew that tone. She knew that pressure. It was the sound of a predator cornering prey. She reached the bar station, where the bartender, a cynical guy named Dave, was polishing glasses. "Order for table 4, Sarah said, handing over the ticket. "Dave, do you know who those people are?" Dave glanced at the ticket. "The guy in the suit? That's Marcus Thorne, hedge fund guy. Real piece of work. Tippers like him usually leave 0 or 100, depending on who they're trying to impress." "Why?" "Nothing," Sarah said, watching the booth from afar. "They're just pushing that old man really hard." "Not our business, Sarah," Dave warned, pouring the amber liquid into a heavy glass. "Rich people eating rich people. It's the circle of life. Just drop the drinks, get the check, and pray they tip." Sarah took the tray. She wanted to listen to Dave. She really did. She had her own problems. She had an eviction notice in her purse. But as she looked back at the booth, she saw Arthur rubbing his temples, looking small and cornered. She remembered her own grandfather, a man who had lost his pension to a scammer over the phone. He had died of a heart attack 3 months later, broken by the shame of it. Sarah tightened her grip on the tray. "Just do your job," she told herself. But as she walked back to the table, the atmosphere had shifted from pressure to something far more dangerous. Sarah slowed her pace as she approached the booth, utilizing the noise of a nearby birthday party to mask her arrival. She approached from the side, slightly behind Elena, intending to place the wine bottle down. Arthur was reading the document, his finger tracing the lines. "I don't see the clause about the charity retention, Marcus. You promised the orphanage would remain funded." "It's in the appendix, Arthur," Marcus sighed, feigning exhaustion. "Page 42. Look, you're tired. You're overthinking it." I just need to use the restroom before I sign," Arthur said, starting to rise. "I need to splash some water on my face." "Sit down, Arthur," Elena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was commanded. "We don't have time. Sign, then you can go to the bathroom." Arthur hesitated, then slowly sank back into his seat. "I'm just so thirsty," he mumbled. "That's why we ordered the drink," Marcus said, looking over Arthur's shoulder toward the bar. "Where is that waitress?" Sarah stepped forward. "Right here, sir." She placed the wine bottle on the table. As she reached across to place the scotch in front of Arthur, Marcus suddenly moved his arm, knocking his fork onto the floor with a loud clatter. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Marcus yelled, causing Arthur to jump. "I'm so clumsy. Miss, could you get me a fresh fork? Immediately?" It was a distraction, a classic, clumsy distraction. Sarah's eyes were trained to look at the table, but her peripheral vision was sharp. In the split second that Marcus yelled and Arthur flinched, looking down at the floor, Sarah saw Elena's hand move. It was incredibly fast. Elena reached into her designer blazer. Between her index and middle finger was a tiny blue glass vial. With a flick of her wrist, she uncorked it with her thumb and tipped it over the glass of scotch. Sarah was currently lowering to the table. A small amount of clear liquid dropped into the amber alcohol. It dissolved instantly, leaving no trace. Elena's hand was back in her lap before Marcus had even finished complaining about the fork. Sarah froze. The glass of scotch was now sitting directly in front of Arthur. "The fork!" Marcus barked at Sarah. "Are you deaf?" Yes, right away," Sarah stammered. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She stepped back, her mind racing. What was that? Drugs? Poison? She retreated to the service station, grabbing a clean fork from the bin, her hands shaking. She looked back at the table. Arthur was reaching for the glass. "To a new future, Arthur," Marcus said, raising his own empty hand in a mock toast. "Drink up. It'll settle your nerves." Arthur lifted the glass to his lips. Sarah's world narrowed down to a single point. If that man drank that scotch, something terrible was going to happen. She knew it in her gut. She thought about the hospital bills. She thought about Rick firing her. She thought about the police. If she caused a scene and was wrong, she would be fired. She would lose her apartment. She would be on the street. But if she was right? She watched the glass tilt. The liquid touched Arthur's lip. "Wait!" Sarah's internal monologue screamed, but her mouth stayed shut. "No, I can't. I can't lose this job." Then she saw Elena smirk. It was a tiny, cruel twitch of the lips as she watched the old man about to ingest whatever was in that vial. That smirk did it. That was the smirk of someone who knew they had won. It was the same smirk the scammer had used on her grandfather. Sarah didn't walk back to the table. She ran. She didn't care about the decorum. She didn't care about the tip. As Arthur tilted his head back to take the swallow, Sarah lunged forward. She didn't try to grab the glass. That would be too hard. Instead, she feigned a trip. She slammed her hip into the side of the table, hard. The impact shook the booth. Arthur's hand jerked. The heavy crystal glass of scotch flew from his grip, splashing the amber liquid all over the expensive legal documents and soaking Marcus Thorne's Italian silk suit. The glass shattered on the floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet restaurant. Silence descended on the room. Every head turned. Marcus jumped up, his chest dripping with alcohol. His face turned a violent shade of red. "You stupid cow! Look what you did!" Arthur sat frozen, blinking, his hands hovering over the ruined papers. The papers! "I am so sorry," Sarah gasped, grabbing a napkin and frantically dabbing at the table. But she was careful to dab only the papers, smearing the ink, making them illegible. "I slipped. The floor is wet." "Get away," Elena hissed, standing up. She looked furious, but underneath the anger, Sarah saw panic. "You've ruined the contracts." Rick, the manager, was sprinting across the dining room, his face pale. "Mr. Thorne, I am so sorry." "Sarah, get away from the table. You're done. You hear me? You're fired. Get out." Sarah ignored Rick. She ignored the furious Marcus wiping his suit. She leaned in close to Arthur, pretending to wipe a spot of scotch from his sleeve. She locked eyes with the old man. The confusion in his face was heartbreaking. He looked terrified. Sarah dropped the napkin. She gripped Arthur's wrist with a strength she didn't know she had. She lowered her voice to a harsh, desperate whisper, ensuring only he could hear. "Sir, you have to leave now." Arthur blinked. "What?" "The drink," she hissed, her eyes darting to the wet stain on the tablecloth where the scotch had pooled. "She put something in it. I saw her. They aren't helping you. They are trying to hurt you. You have to get up and run." Arthur's body went rigid. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her. He saw the terror in her eyes. He saw the honesty. Then he looked at Marcus, who was currently screaming at the manager, his face twisted into a mask of rage that didn't match the benevolent friend act he had played all night. He looked at Elena, who was frantically trying to save the wet papers, her hands shaking. Arthur was old, but he wasn't stupid. He had built an empire on instinct, and his instinct just screamed that this waitress was telling the truth. "Get your things," Sarah whispered. "You little idiot." Marcus lunged toward Sarah, grabbing her by the shoulder. "You're going to pay for this suit. That's $5,000. I'm calling the police." Sarah winced at his grip, but she didn't back down. "Let go of me." "I'm going to ruin you," Marcus spat, tightening his grip. Suddenly, a hand clamped over Marcus's wrist. It was wrinkled, spotted with age, but it held a surprising amount of iron strength. "Let go of the young lady, Marcus," Arthur said. His voice was no longer the wavering mumble of a confused grandfather. It was cold, hard, and deep. Marcus froze, looking down at Arthur. "Arthur? I'm just handling the help. She ruined the deal." Arthur stood up slowly. He was taller than he looked when sitting down. He stared Marcus dead in the eye. "The deal was ruined the moment you walked in here," Arthur said. "We're leaving." "Leaving?" Elena laughed nervously. "Arthur, don't be silly. It's just a spilled drink. We can print new papers. We can—" "I said," Arthur's voice boomed, silencing the restaurant. "We are leaving, and she is coming with me." Arthur pointed at Sarah. Rick, the manager, stammered. "Mr. Sterling, she's fired. She can't go anywhere. She has to clean this up." "Mr. Sterling," Sarah thought. Sterling? As in Arthur Sterling, the founder of Sterling Heavy Industries, one of the richest men in Chicago? Arthur ignored the manager. He looked at Sarah. "What is your name, child?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah," Arthur nodded. "Get your coat. You're done working here." "She's not going anywhere until the police arrive," Marcus shouted, blocking the booth exit. "This is assault. She attacked me." Arthur reached into his inner pocket. For a second, Marcus flinched, perhaps expecting a weapon. Instead, Arthur pulled out a phone. But it wasn't a smartphone. It was an old, brick-like satellite phone. He pressed a single button and held it to his ear. "Code red," Arthur said calmly into the phone. "Location, the Velvet Oak. 2 hostiles. 1 extraction. I have a civilian with me." He hung up and looked at Marcus. "You have 3 minutes before my security detail arrives," Arthur said, checking his watch. "If I were you, I'd start running." The atmosphere in the Velvet Oak shifted instantly from the hushed murmur of fine dining to the jagged tension of a standoff. 3 minutes. That was what the old man had said. Marcus Thorne, recovering from his initial shock, let out a bark of incredulous laughter. He smoothed the lapels of his ruined, scotch-soaked suit. "Security detail?" Marcus scoffed, looking around the room as if performing for an audience. "Arthur, this is pathetic. You've finally lost it completely. The dementia is talking. You're hallucinating commandos now." He turned to the stunned diners. "I apologize, everyone. My uncle is unwell. He's having an episode." Elena, however, wasn't laughing. She was frantically shoving the wet documents into her briefcase, her eyes darting toward the front entrance. She knew Arthur Sterling better than Marcus did. She knew that the senility they were counting on was recent and potentially exaggerated. If the old wolf was waking up, they were in trouble. "Marcus!" Elena hissed, tugging his sleeve. "We need to go. Now!" "I'm not going anywhere until the police arrest this waitress," Marcus roared, pointing a shaking finger at Sarah. "She assaulted me. She destroyed legal property." Sarah stood next to Arthur, her apron stained with wine and water. She felt exposed, small, and terrified. But Arthur's hand was still on the table, steady as a rock, and his presence felt like a shield. "1 minute," Arthur said. He didn't look at his watch. He just knew. Rick, the manager, finally found his courage, or rather, his fear of Marcus Thorne outweighed his fear of the confused old man. He stepped forward, his face red. "Sarah, Get your things and get out the back door before I call the cops myself. And you, sir," he sneered at Arthur, "you need to pay the bill and leave. You're disturbing the guests." Arthur slowly turned his head to look at Rick. "I bought this building in 1982, son. I could turn it into a parking lot by tomorrow morning if the mood struck me. I suggest you step back." Rick's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the front of the restaurant burst open. They didn't swing open, they were thrown open with force. The wind and rain howled in from the street, followed instantly by 4 figures. They weren't police. They were far more intimidating. Dressed in dark, tactical suits that looked like expensive charcoal tailoring mixed with body armor, they moved with fluid, synchronized precision. They wore earpieces and carried themselves with the lethal grace of apex predators. The lead man, a towering figure with a shaved head and a scar running through his left eyebrow, scanned the room in a split second. His eyes locked onto Arthur. "Target acquired," the man said into his lapel microphone. He marched straight to the booth, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. Marcus Thorne, who had been blustering about lawsuits seconds ago, suddenly looked very small. He took a step back, bumping into the table. "Mr. Sterling," the lead security officer said, nodding respectfully to Arthur. "Status?" "I'm fine, Stone," Arthur replied, his voice calm. "But we have a contamination breach. The scotch." He pointed to the shattered glass and the puddle on the floor. "Secure a sample. I want it in the lab within the hour." "Understood," Stone said. He gestured to one of his men, who immediately produced a sterile collection kit and began swabbing the floor and collecting glass shards. Elena went pale. "This is ridiculous. You can't just come in here and—" "Ma'am," Stone said, turning to her. He didn't raise his voice, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Step away from the table, now." Elena dropped her briefcase. "Marcus Thorne and Elena Vane," Arthur said, his voice laced with a disappointment that cut deeper than anger. "You will hear from my lawyers, not the ones you paid off. The real ones." Marcus tried to rally. "You can't prove anything. It was just a drink. You're a senile old man." Arthur ignored him. He turned to Sarah. "Stone, this is Sarah. She is the extraction priority." Stone looked at Sarah. For the first time, his stony expression softened slightly. "Ma'am, if you would come with us." "Me?" Sarah squeaked. "But my job. My manager." Stone turned to Rick, who was cowering by the host stand. Stone reached into his jacket and pulled out a black business card embossed with silver lettering. He flicked it onto the table. "Any severance issues? Call that number," Stone said. "But I wouldn't expect a reference for her. I'd be more worried about whether you'll have a job when Mr. Sterling reviews the lease for this restaurant." Rick looked at the card, then at Arthur, and realized with dawning horror exactly who he had been shouting at. Arthur Sterling. The man who owned half the skyline. "Let's go," Arthur said gently, placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "It's not safe here." Sarah felt like she was in a dream. She untied her apron, letting it fall to the floor right next to Marcus's expensive Italian leather shoes. She grabbed her purse from under the counter. Surrounded by the 4 guards, Sarah and Arthur walked out of the restaurant. As they passed Marcus, the billionaire nephew hissed, "You'll regret this, you little rat. You have no idea who you just crossed." Stone, the head of security, stopped. He didn't touch Marcus. He just leaned in close, invading his personal space. "If you come within 500 feet of this young woman," Stone whispered, low enough that only Marcus could hear, "we won't call the police. We'll just handle it." Marcus swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. They stepped out into the rain, but Sarah didn't get wet, An umbrella was instantly snapped open over her head. Waiting at the curb was not a taxi, but a convoy of 3 black armored SUVs. The engines were humming, the lights cutting through the gloom. "Get in, Sarah," Arthur said, gesturing to the middle vehicle. Sarah hesitated. "Sir, Where are we going?" "Somewhere they can't reach us," Arthur said grimly. "Because, my dear, you just saved my life. And in doing so, you just put a massive target on your back." The interior of the SUV was quieter than a library and smelled of rich leather. The windows were tinted so dark that the city outside was just a blur of neon and rain. Sarah sat on the bench seat, her hands clutching her cheap purse, her heart still racing at a mile a minute. Arthur sat across from her. He had taken off his glasses and was rubbing his eyes. The transformation was startling. In the restaurant, he had played the part of the confused, frail grandfather perfectly. Now, in the safety of the car, the frailty vanished. His posture straightened. His eyes, though tired, were sharp and intelligent. He looked like the titan of industry he was rumored to be. "There is a bottle of water in the console to your right," Arthur said softly. "And some chocolate. It helps with the shock." Sarah found the water and drank half the bottle in one go. "Mr. Sterling, who were those people? I mean, I know they said they were your family, but—" "They are my nephew and his wife," Arthur sighed, looking out the window. "Marcus is my sister's son. I raised him. I paid for his boarding schools, his Harvard degree, his first failed business, and his second. I foolishly thought that blood meant loyalty." "They tried to drug you," Sarah said, the reality of it finally settling in. "I saw the vial. It was blue glass. Elena had it in her sleeve." Arthur nodded slowly. "I suspected they were planning a hostile takeover of the company. They wanted me to sign over my voting rights. But I assumed they would try to blackmail me, or perhaps forge documents. I didn't think they would try to chemically induce a mental breakdown in a public restaurant." He looked at Sarah with intense gratitude. "That drug? Stone will analyze it, but I suspect it was a potent hallucinogen. If I had drunk that scotch, I would have started raving. I would have made a scene. They would have had me committed to a psychiatric facility by morning, and with me declared incompetent, they would have had full control of the Sterling Trust. That trust is worth $40 billion. Sarah gasped. 40 billion? "People kill for a lot less, Sarah," Arthur said gravely. "Which brings us to you." The car slowed down and turned through a massive iron gate. Sarah peered out. They were entering a long, winding driveway, lined with ancient oak trees. At the top of the hill stood a mansion that looked more like a fortress, bathed in floodlights. "Where are we?" "My home," Arthur said. "Or, as Marcus calls it, the mausoleum." The car stopped. Stone opened the door. "We're secure, sir. The perimeter is locked down." They ushered Sarah inside. The foyer was breathtaking, with marble floors and a chandelier the size of a small car, but Sarah was too anxious to appreciate the architecture. Arthur led her into a warm library, where a fire was already crackling in the hearth. An older woman in a housekeeper's uniform appeared instantly with a pot of tea and a warm blanket. "Sit, please," Arthur insisted. Sarah sat on the edge of a leather sofa. "Mr. Sterling, I have to go home. My mom, she's in the hospital. I need to visit her tomorrow. I have rent to pay. I can't just—" "Sarah," Arthur interrupted gently. "You cannot go back to your apartment tonight. Marcus and Elena are desperate. They just lost their one shot at the Empire. They know you saw the vial. You are the only witness to their attempted assault. If you go home, I cannot guarantee your safety." Sarah felt a cold chill, that had nothing to do with the rain. So, I'm a prisoner. No, Arthur said firmly. You are a guest under protection, and you are a potential partner. Partner? Sarah blinked. I'm a waitress. I didn't even finish college because we ran out of money. Arthur stood up and walked to the fireplace, leaning on the mantel. You have something Marcus will never have. You have observation skills. You noticed the vial when no one else did. You noticed the tension. And more importantly, you had the moral courage to act. Most people would have stayed silent to keep their job. You risked your livelihood to save a stranger. He turned to face her. I need that. I am surrounded by sharks, Sarah. Lawyers, accountants, board members. I don't know who is on Marcus's payroll and who is loyal to me. I need someone who is invisible. Someone who can see what I can't. Sarah shook her head. I don't understand. I want to hire you, Arthur said. Not as a waitress, as my personal assistant, my eyes and ears. I will pay off your mother's medical bills, all of them. I will pay off your rent. I will give you a salary of $10,000 a month. Sarah's jaw dropped. 10,000? That's... But there is a catch, Arthur warned, his face darkening. To do this, we have to finish what we started tonight. We have to expose Marcus and Elena. And to do that, we have to set a trap. We have to make them think they won. How? Sarah asked. The sample from the floor, Arthur said. Stone is analyzing it. Once we know what it is, we will know their supplier. But to catch them, I need to play dead. Or rather, I need to play crazy. He stepped closer. I'm going to let them think the drug worked. I'm going to let them think I'm losing my mind. And I need you to be the one to leak that information to them. You want me to spy on them? Sarah whispered. I want you to be a double agent, Arthur corrected. They think you're just a clumsy waitress they can intimidate. We're going to use that arrogance against them. But Sarah, you need to know. If we mess this up, if they figure it out, they are dangerous people. This isn't just business anymore, it's war. Sarah looked at the fire. She thought about her mother, lying in the hospital bed, worried about money. She thought about the eviction notice. Then she thought about Marcus calling her a stupid cow, and the way Elena had smirked while poisoning an old man. She looked up at Arthur Sterling. My mom needs surgery next week, Sarah said quietly. The insurance denied it. Consider it approved, Arthur said without hesitation. I own the hospital. Sarah took a deep breath. Her hands stopped shaking. Okay, she said. What do I have to do? Arthur smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a general going into battle. Tomorrow morning, Arthur said, you're going to call Marcus. You're going to tell him you want to make a deal. You're going to tell him that you saved the napkin he used to wipe his suit. And you're going to tell him that for $50,000, you'll give it to him. But I don't have the napkin, Sarah said. No, Arthur replied, but he doesn't know that. We're going to lure him out, and when he comes for the napkin, we're going to see exactly how far he's willing to go. Just then, the heavy library doors opened again. Stone walked in. He looked grim. He was holding a tablet. Sir, Stone said, we just intercepted a call from Marcus's burner phone. And? Arthur asked. He didn't call a lawyer, Stone said, looking at Sarah. He called a cleaner, a hitman, sir. He's not trying to sue Sarah anymore. He's trying to erase her. Arthur's face turned to stone. He looked at Sarah. Change of plans, Arthur said. We aren't waiting for tomorrow. We strike tonight. The plan was simple, dangerous, and relied entirely on Marcus Thorne's arrogance. Stone had intercepted the hitman's location, a freelancer named Viper, 10 miles outside the city. 2 of Stone's teams were already dispatched to intercept him. That left Marcus believing his assassin was on the way, giving him a false sense of invincibility. "He won't come himself if he thinks the job is already done," Arthur explained, pacing the library floor. "We need to make him desperate. We need him to believe that the hit is compromised and that he needs to handle it personally." Sarah sat in a high-backed chair while a technician taped a microscopic microphone to the underside of her collar. "So, I have to lure him out?" "You have to sell him a lie," Stone said, handing her a burner phone. "You're going to call him. You're going to tell him that you know he sent someone. Tell him you escaped. Tell him you have the napkin with the poison residue, and you've hidden it. Tell him if he doesn't meet you personally with $1 million in cash, you're going straight to the FBI. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the phone. "He'll kill me." "He'll try," Stone corrected. "But we will be there. The meeting point is the old cargo docks near the airport. It's isolated, dark, and technically it's Sterling property. We control the terrain." Sarah looked at the phone. She thought of the hospital room where her mother was sleeping, unaware that her daughter was about to walk into a trap. She dialed the number Stone had written down. It rang twice. "Who is this?" Marcus's voice was jagged, anxious. "It's the Waitress," Sarah said, her voice shaking. She didn't have to act. The fear was real. "Your guy. The one in the black sedan. He missed." There was a silence on the line. A heavy, stunned silence. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus lied smoothly, though his voice pitched up an octave. "Don't lie to me," Sarah screamed into the phone, channeling all her frustration from the last 5 years of poverty. "I saw him. I ran. But I still have the napkin, Marcus. I have the blue stain. I looked it up. I know what that stuff is." "You're bluffing," Marcus hissed. "Am I?" Sarah lowered her voice. $1 million. Tonight, or I walk into the police station and your uncle finds out you tried to kill him. Do you think you'll get the inheritance from a prison cell?" "Where?" Marcus asked immediately. The greed and fear had taken over. "Cargo Dock 4, behind the airport. 1 hour. Come alone. If I see anyone else, I send the photos to the press." She hung up. Arthur looked at her, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Perfect. Now, let's go hunting." The drive to the cargo docks was silent. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour, slashing sideways against the armored SUVs. When they arrived, the docks were a ghost town of rusted shipping containers and towering cranes that looked like skeletal dinosaurs in the lightning flashes. "Stay in the car until I give the signal," Stone ordered Arthur. "Sarah, you're up." Sarah stepped out into the rain. She was wearing a heavy raincoat Arthur had lent her. It was 3 sizes too big, making her look even smaller and more vulnerable. She walked to the center of the open concrete clearing, illuminated by a single, flickering halogen light pole. She stood there, clutching a plastic Ziploc bag that contained a harmless napkin stained with blue ink, a prop. She waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then headlights cut through the darkness. A sleek silver sports car roared onto the dock, splashing through deep puddles. It skidded to a halt 20 feet from her. The engine died. The door opened. Marcus Thorne stepped out. He was wearing a trench coat over his ruined suit, and he held a large black umbrella. He looked calm. Too calm. He walked toward her, stopping just outside of arm's reach. "You're a hard woman to kill, Sarah," Marcus shouted over the wind. "I have to give you credit. Most rats scurry away when you shine a light on them." "The money," Sarah demanded, holding up the bag. "Show me the money." Marcus chuckled. He reached into his coat, but he didn't pull out a wad of cash. He pulled out a silenced pistol. "You really thought I was going to pay you?" Marcus sneered, leveling the gun at her chest. "You naive little girl. There is no money. There is only a loose end." "You admitted it," Sarah said, her voice trembling but loud enough for the microphone. "You admitted you tried to kill Arthur." "Of course I did," Marcus shouted, his ego demanding he brag before the kill. "The old man is a relic. He's sitting on $40 billion, wasting it on charities and orphanages. It's mine. It's my birthright. I spiked his drink and I'd do it again. And now, I'm going to put a bullet in your brain, dump your body in the lake, and by tomorrow morning, no one will even remember your name." He cocked the gun. "Goodbye, Sarah." Sarah squeezed her eyes shut. Click. Suddenly, blinding floodlights from every direction turned on simultaneously, bathing the dock in brilliance brighter than the sun. "Drop the weapon," Stone's voice boomed over a loudspeaker. From the shadows of the shipping containers, 12 tactical officers emerged, rifles raised, red laser dots dancing on Marcus's chest. Marcus froze. He squinted against the light, panic seizing his face. A black SUV rolled forward, stopping between Sarah and Marcus. The back door opened, and Arthur Sterling stepped out, flanked by Stone. Arthur didn't look frail. He looked like a judge delivering a death sentence. "It's over, Marcus," Arthur said, his voice cutting through the rain. "We have your confession on tape. We have the analysis of the poison. And thanks to Stone, your cleaner is currently handcuffed in the back of a police van, giving a full statement." Marcus looked around wildly. He was surrounded. There was nowhere to run. The gun in his hand wavered. "Put it down, son," Arthur said, a hint of sadness in his voice. "Don't make them kill you." Marcus looked at Arthur, then at Sarah. His face twisted from fear into a grotesque, hateful smile. He didn't drop the gun. Instead, he slowly lowered it to his side. But he didn't let go. He reached into his pocket with his other hand and pulled out his phone. "You think you've won?" Marcus laughed. It was a manic, broken sound. "You think you're so smart, Uncle Arthur. You always underestimated me. You always thought I was just a greedy child." "It's over," Stone warned, stepping in front of Arthur. "Drop the phone." "I don't think so," Marcus said. He turned the phone screen around so Sarah could see it. Sarah squinted through the rain. The blood drained from her face. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed onto the wet concrete. On the screen was a live video feed. It was a hospital room. "Mom!" Sarah screamed. The video feed was grainy, but undeniable. Sarah's mother, unconscious and hooked up to monitors, lay in her hospital bed. Standing over her, wearing a stolen nurse's uniform and a surgical mask, was Eleanor Vane. In Eleanor's hand was a syringe filled with a dark liquid. She was looking directly into the camera, her eyes cold and dead. "Say hello to your mother, Sarah," Marcus taunted, holding the phone high like a shield. "And say hello to my wife, Elena. She's at St. Mary's right now. ICU, room 402. Isn't that right?" Sarah sobbed, trying to crawl toward him. "Please don't hurt her. She has nothing to do with this." "She has everything to do with this," Marcus screamed, regaining his confidence. He looked at the armed guards surrounding him. "Back off, all of you. If I don't tap a button on this app every 5 minutes, Elena injects the potassium chloride. It causes instant cardiac arrest. It looks like a natural heart attack. The doctors won't even know it was murder until the autopsy." Arthur's face went grey. He looked at Stone. Stone touched his earpiece, whispering furiously to his team, but he shook his head slightly at Arthur. They couldn't get to the hospital in time. "What do you want?" Arthur asked, his voice hollow. "I want out," Marcus said. I want a helicopter. I want $5 million in cash. And I want the signed trust documents transferring full power of attorney to me." "You're insane," Arthur said. "You'll never get away with this." "If I don't," Marcus grinned, "the waitress's mother dies. Then maybe I tell Elena to pay a visit to your favorite charity, or maybe burn down this warehouse. I have nothing left to lose, Uncle. I'm all in." The rain pounded against the pavement. The standoff had shifted. The guns were useless now. Sarah pulled herself up from the ground. She wiped the rain and tears from her face. She looked at the phone screen, at her fragile mother, who had worked 3 jobs to raise her, who was now a pawn in a rich man's game. Something inside Sarah snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a lock turning. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, white-hot rage. She looked at Marcus. She looked at his expensive shoes, his smug smile, the way he held the phone like a trophy. "Let me talk to her," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, eerily calm. Marcus blinked, surprised by her tone. "What?" "Elena," Sarah said. "Let me talk to her. If you want us to cooperate, I need to know she's alive. Put her on speaker." Marcus hesitated, then shrugged. "Why not? Let's hear you beg." He tapped the screen. "Elena, the little waitress wants to say hi." On the tiny speaker, Elena's voice crackled through. "Make it quick. My arm is getting tired holding this needle." "Elena," Sarah said. She stepped closer to Marcus. Stone tensed, ready to tackle her if she did something stupid. But Sarah held up a hand to stop him. "Elena, look at the monitor behind my mother," Sarah said. "What?" Elena sounded confused. "The heart monitor," Sarah said, taking another step. "Look at the heart rate. It's elevated, isn't it?" Elena turned her head slightly to look at the machine in the video. Yeah. "So what?" "She's dying anyway." "No," Sarah said, taking another step. She was now only 5 feet from Marcus. "It's elevated because she's awake, and she knows you're there." "She's in a coma, you idiot," Marcus spat. "She hasn't moved in." "My mother," Sarah interrupted, locking eyes with Marcus, "spent 20 years as a psychiatric nurse in the violent ward at Cook County Jail before she got sick. She knows how to handle psychos like you." "What are you talking about?" Marcus frowned. Sarah shouted, "Now, Mom!" On the video screen, the unconscious woman in the bed suddenly exploded into motion. Her arm lashed out, grabbing the metal IV pole next to the bed. With surprising strength, she swung it backward, smashing it directly into Elena's face. Elena screamed, dropping the syringe and the phone. The camera tumbled to the floor, showing a chaotic view of the ceiling, but the audio picked up the sounds of a struggle, followed by the distinct clang of a metal bedpan hitting a human skull. Then, silence. Then, a wheezing, tired voice came over the phone. "Sarah, honey, I think I broke the nice lady's nose." Marcus stood frozen, staring at the phone in his hand. His mouth hung open. His hostage leverage had just knocked itself unconscious. He looked up. Sarah wasn't crying anymore. She was standing 2 feet away from him, and she was holding the pepper spray she kept on her keychain, the one she carried for late-night bus rides. "You're fired," Sarah whispered. She unleashed the spray directly into Marcus's eyes. Marcus screamed, dropping the gun and the phone, clutching his face. He fell to his knees, blinded and gasping. "Go! Go! Go!" Stone roared. The security team swarmed. Within seconds, Marcus was pinned to the wet concrete, handcuffs clicking shut. Stone grabbed the fallen gun. Arthur rushed to Sarah, who was standing over Marcus, shivering violently as the adrenaline crashed. "Sarah!" Arthur grabbed her shoulders. How did you know? How did you know she was awake?" Sarah looked up at Arthur, her teeth chattering. I didn't. I just knew my mum hates it when people stand too close to her bed. And I prayed. Stone walked over, holding his own phone. Police are at the hospital. They found Elena unconscious on the floor. Your mother is fine, Sarah. She's asking if you're eating enough. Arthur threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, booming laugh of sheer relief that echoed across the docks. He hugged Sarah, not like a boss, but like a grandfather. It's over, Arthur said. It's finally over. But as the police sirens began to wail in the distance, signaling the official end of the night, Sarah looked down at Marcus, who was being dragged away, cursing and weeping. She realized that her life as a waitress was gone. She had just taken down a billionaire. She had stared death in the face. And she realized she had forgot to clock out at the Velvet Oak. 3 months had passed since the night of the storm, but the ripples were still being felt across the city of Chicago. The trial of Marcus Thorne and Eleanor Vane had been the most televised event of the decade. With the testimony of Arthur Sterling, the video evidence from the docks, and the confession of the hitman Viper, the defense didn't stand a chance. The jury took less than an hour to return a verdict. Attempted murder, conspiracy, extortion, and kidnapping. Marcus, who had spent his life in bespoke suits, was now trading them for an orange jumpsuit in a maximum security facility. Elena, whose nose was still healing crookedly thanks to Sarah's mother, was in the cell right next to him. Sarah Jenkins stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling mirror in a penthouse apartment overlooking the lake. She smoothed the lapels of her navy blue blazer. It wasn't a waitress uniform. It was tailored, professional, and commanded respect. "You look like you were born for this," a voice said from the doorway. Sarah turned to see her mother, Martha, standing there. She looked vibrant. The surgery had been a complete success, and without the crushing weight of debt and double shifts, the color had returned to her cheeks. "I'm nervous, Mom," Sarah admitted, picking up her briefcase. "It's my first board meeting as the director." "You faced down a hitman and a billionaire in the rain, Sarah," Martha laughed, straightening Sarah's collar. "I think you can handle a few accountants." Sarah smiled. Her life had flipped upside down in the best way possible. True to his word, Arthur Sterling hadn't just paid the bills. He had obliterated every obstacle in Sarah's life. The debt was gone. The terrifying apartment in the bad part of town was a distant memory. But Arthur had done more than throw money at her. He had seen potential. He had hired private tutors to help Sarah finish her business degree in record time. He had brought her into the Sterling Foundation, not as a figurehead, but as his right hand. He claimed he needed someone with street smarts to ensure his charity money actually helped people and didn't just line the pockets of bureaucrats. A sleek black car was waiting downstairs. Stone, the security chief, held the door open. "Good morning, Miss Jenkins," Stone said with a genuine smile. "Ready to go?" "Ready, Stone," she replied. The car didn't head to the Sterling Tower immediately. "Detour, please," Sarah said. "I have one loose end to tie up." Stone nodded, as if he expected this. The car wound through the city streets and pulled up in front of the Velvet Oak. It was just before lunch service. The restaurant was bustling with staff preparing for the day. Sarah walked in. The smell of polished wood and expensive wine hit her, triggering a fleeting moment of anxiety, but she pushed it down. She wasn't the invisible girl with the water pitcher anymore. She walked straight to the host stand. Rick, the manager, was there, berating a young busboy for a smudge on a glass. "I told you, presentation is everything," Rick barked. "Do you want to work here or not?" "Excuse me," Sarah said clearly. Rick spun around, his face ready to scold a customer, but his expression froze when he saw her. He didn't recognize her at first. The hair, The clothes, the confidence. But then it clicked. "Sarah?" Rick stammered. He looked her up and down, his eyes bulging. "I heard about the news. I didn't realize. Look, about that night." "I'm not here for an apology, Rick," Sarah said coolly. "Right," Rick sweat. "Well, if you're looking for your old job back, I'm afraid we've filled the position. Though I suppose I could." "I don't want the job," Sarah interrupted. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick document. She dropped it onto the podium with a heavy thud. "What is this?" Rick asked. "That is the deed to the building," Sarah said. "Mr. Sterling bought the property last week, and he transferred the management rights of the restaurant to the Sterling Foundation. We're turning it into a non-profit training center for at-risk youth who want to enter the culinary arts." Rick's face went pale. "But what does that mean for me?" Sarah leaned in, just as she had leaned in to save Arthur months ago. "It means," Sarah smiled, "that you have to leave now." Rick opened his mouth to argue, but he saw Stone standing in the doorway, arms crossed. Rick closed his mouth, took off his badge, and walked out the door without a word. Sarah turned to the terrified busboy. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Leo, Mom," the boy whispered. "Leo," Sarah said, "you're in charge until the new manager arrives this afternoon. Treat the staff with respect, okay? We don't yell here anymore." She walked out into the sunshine, feeling lighter than air. 20 minutes later, she walked into the boardroom at the top of Sterling Tower. 12 men and women in suits stopped talking and looked at her. At the head of the table sat Arthur Sterling. He looked healthier than he had in years. He stood up as she entered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur announced, his voice booming with pride, "I'd like to introduce you to the new Vice President of Operations, the woman who saved my life and the future of this company. Sarah Jenkins." The room broke into applause. Sarah took her seat at the right hand of the billionaire. She looked out the window at the sprawling city below. She thought about the shattered glass. She thought about the blue vial. She thought about the 6 words she had whispered that changed history. "Sir, you have to leave now." She looked at Arthur and smiled. "Shall we get to work?" Sarah asked. "Indeed," Arthur replied, opening his file. "We have a lot to do." And that is the story of how one waitress's keen eye and bravery brought down a corrupt empire. Sarah could have stayed silent. She could have protected her job and ignored the injustice happening right in front of her. But she chose to act. And in doing so, she didn't just save a billionaire. She saved herself. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one with the most money, but the one with the most courage. What would you have done in Sarah's shoes? Would you have risked your job to warn Arthur, or would you have stayed out of it? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss the next story. Thanks for watching.